Most years, my teaching partner and I start the school year by showing the seniors a film called 180 Degrees South in our Echoment class, integrating the required economics and law and government class. Echoment. That's right. We used to have a governomics too, went the other way. We're nothing if not. It's same thing as the yup, right? We put it together. We got it. So, this is a documentary from 2010 that chronicles Jeff Johnson's trek from California to Chile, with his intended final destination being to climb Patagonia's Corcovado volcano. He's attempting to replicate the trip that was taken by Yvon Chouinard and Doug Tompkins, the eventual founders of Patagonia and the North Face, respectively, back in 1968. It's a visually stunning film that has a lot of great lessons for seniors in high school. Conserve the environment, travel outside your comfort zone, take risks, rethink what progress means. In fact, they are great lessons for all of us. Over the years that we have shown this film, I've become increasingly intrigued by Yvon and Doug. The perspectives they share on the impact of progress on the environment are super interesting. With an eye on conservation, they contemplate the price of progress. Sure, our industrial and technological advances have made our lives more efficient, more productive, and yes, oftentimes more enjoyable. But they remind us that we are doing this at the expense of the earth. They're not necessarily saying we should reject all progress, just that we should be more aware of the impact of those advances and consider whether it's worth it. In connecting the film's themes of climbing and environmental conservation, Doug says, in response to the people who say you can't go back, I say, well, what happens if you get to the cliff and you take one step forward? Or you do a 180-degree turn and take one step forward. Which way are you going? Which is progress? Right? Who's to say that progress isn't simplifying, that progress isn't scaling back or returning to something more natural? Since the movie was filmed in 2010, two related major events have happened. The first, quite sad. Doug Tompkins, who, by the way, single-handedly conserved over 2 million acres of untouched land in Brazil and Argentina, died from hypothermia, contracted when his kayak flipped during a wind event on a Patagonia lake. Second, more recently and much less upsetting, Yvon made news last month when he announced that he was giving Patagonia, a company he has had a love-hate relationship with since its inception, away to a trust and nonprofit organization to combat climate change and to protect undeveloped land around the globe. Patagonia is a $3 billion company, and he just gave it away. And as enormous and significant as this is, it really isn't a surprise to anyone who has followed Chouinard over the past few decades. Conservation has always been a focus of his, giving away 1% of its sales each year to grassroots environmental activists and suing the Trump administration in an attempt to protect the Bears Ears National Monument in Utah. And he never really particularly wanted the riches his wildly successful business brought him. He lives very sparsely, especially considering his wealth. And when he was outed as a billionaire in Forbes magazine, he was monumentally annoyed and began to develop a plan to give everything away. There's not a lot I feel particularly hopeful about as it relates to protecting the environment. But I am hopeful that this action by this one person, or more accurately, this one family, will make real positive change. It's not just that there is significant money going to grassroots activists. It's that this is drawing attention to what this family did with their business that may inspire similar actions by other entrepreneurs and the rest of us, wealthy or otherwise, that the earth needs our help. And it's not insignificant that the money the Chouinards left with the nonprofit can be used for political contributions. We don't have to like it, but money drives politics. If money is going to candidates who are environmentally conscious, that can make a difference. We need more policymakers whose priority is the environment. Chouinard is hoping to influence a new form of capitalism that combats the increasing wealth disparity along with combating climate change. He foreshadowed this in 180 Degrees South when he said, "In the United States, we don't trust the government, and so we rely on philanthropy." I always thought that quote was kind of interesting. I teach my students about the devolution revolution, the idea that as states try to extricate themselves from federal regulation, they also lose funding from the federal government. And when the states can't pick up the tab for the programs that their citizens rely on, they pass that cost on to local governments. And when local governments can't pick up the tab, they pass the cost and responsibilities of implementing these programs on to charitable organizations. So yeah, Yvon, you got something there. But voters bear a responsibility here too. If we don't trust the government, and mistrust of the government has steadily increased since the 1950s, then isn't it our responsibility to install politicians who we trust? No one else can do that for us. We've got to advocate for, work for, contribute to, and vote for politicians who reflect our values, not just on the environment, but across the board. With midterm elections coming up on November 8th, we need to recommit ourselves to being informed and active voters. Know what the candidates stand for on the issues, but also know who the candidates are. When I see debates, campaign events, and the off-the-cuff remarks by those running for office, I often hear Maya Angelou repeating in the back of my mind, "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." Trust your instincts, but also know what you're looking for in a politician. Political scientists identify 3 types of voting that members of Congress do. They're often called attitudinal, representational, and organizational. Attitudinal refers to a vote where the Congress member is voting their own conscience, even if it doesn't necessarily comport with what their constituents want. For instance, perhaps they vote to pass a bill that will shut down a mining company in their district, but will have a positive impact on the environment overall. Representational refers to a vote that represents the will of the constituents, even if it doesn't comport with their own personal beliefs. So here, you might have a member of Congress who carries the belief that life starts at conception, who votes to protect abortion rights because that is what their constituents want. And finally, organizational votes are when a Congress member votes the way their party wants them to vote. If Democrats need all 50 votes in the Senate to get a bill passed, all the Dems might get on board, regardless of their own personal beliefs and those of their constituents. Each of these types of votes means that we have to trust our representatives to do the right thing at the right time. At this crucial time, it is more important than ever to be educated about the candidates, really get to know them, educate others, and get out there and vote. And it doesn't stop there. Regardless of who wins, continue to pay attention to how your member is voting and what they're saying about the issues, and hold them accountable. Keep using your voice in service to the things that matter to you. Continue to remind them that they work for you. We know that there are forces out there who are looking to undermine the democratic process and democracy itself. We need to expose those forces and rise up against them. Demand that they be held accountable for illegal, unconstitutional, and undemocratic tactics. We can counteract those tactics by actively working to protect our democracy. Of course, none of this is likely new information to us as Unitarian Universalists. Our fifth and sixth principles speak directly to the actions we can take: the right of conscience and using the democratic process toward a goal of world peace and justice. Now is the time for those principles to shine. Be deliberate and name that our actions are taken with these principles in mind. And don't stop. Let's not pull these out every other October as we approach another pivotal election. Let's sustain our energy between elections once our politicians are in place to, yes, hold them accountable. Be inspired by the actions of those like Yvon Chouinard, like Malala, and Greta Thunberg, but also by those doing work on a smaller but not less significant scale. The citizen who volunteers to work at the voting polls, the community that organizes to clean up the litter that has accumulated along the sides of their roads, the father in Uvalde who sits constant vigil at the elementary school where his 10-year-old was killed until the first responders and government officials are held accountable. I'm so very lucky to be able to be inspired by young people every day at my job. Students holding sit-ins to bring attention to what we can do to affect climate change. Rallies to celebrate that Black Lives Matter. Advocating to administration to have gender-neutral bathrooms at the high school. Let us all recognize and be inspired by those around us who are seeking to make positive change. Let us be guided by our principles in large and small ways, individually and collectively, in election years and in off years, to be the change we want to see in the world.